Hello, everyone, and welcome to another edition of The Triple Take, brought to you by UPMC. I'm Mike Prisuta from Steelers.com and the Steelers Audio Network, joined as always by the tag team from The Drive on SNR and the Steelers Audio Network. You can also catch Dale Lolley's work and Matt Williamson's work on Steelers.com. Guys, how we doing?
We're getting closer to the draft now. We're basically a month, 2 months out, I guess. It's time.
Yeah, the tidal wave of free agency has hit us and gone, and there's still some trickling effects, but it is about draft season.
It is indeed. That's why we're here to do another mock draft. I believe this is mock 3.
I think so, yes.
Where Matt, Dale, and myself go through our picks. And this is the time before we get into it where I remind everyone that these are our picks, not Mike Tomlin's, not Omar Khan's, not Sheldon White's, not Danny Colbert's, not anybody who matters. It's what we think might happen.
We kind of matter.
In the grand scheme of things,
Not so much.
Not really.
Not in comparison to those guys. But just to remind everyone, in case you're new to this type of programming here on the Steelers social media outlets, we go through the first round of the draft, basically 1 through 10. I know it's not exactly 10, 10, 10, but we divide it up into thirds and kind of kick around what we think is significant in that portion of the first round. So, Dale, let's lead it off with you. Anything surprise or delight you going through this for a third time?
Yeah, I think Armand Membo is starting to get some steam as maybe being the top offensive tackle in this draft. Arm length was a little bit longer than Will Campbell out of LSU. Moved really well down at the combine and all the interview stuff. It's not a knock on Campbell at all, but he does have some shorter arms. Membo might be getting, again, some steam as that top offensive tackle in this draft.
And along those lines, you have Campbell sticking in the bayou, and they took a tackle in the first round last year, so that works out quite well, too. Mason Graham, Will Johnson have some things to work out at their pro day, but I can see them in the top 10 for sure.
Well, let's see if you did, in fact, put them in the top 10 as we switch it over to Matt Williamson's first round, picks 1 through 10. And I'm not seeing, oh, look at that, Shedeur Sanders all the way down to number 9.
To number 9, yeah. And the last time the Saints used a first-round pick on a quarterback, Archie Manning. So it's not exactly their style.
We're on our third generation.
Right, we're on
Manning's.
His grandson might be their next one. But anyway, I wouldn't have mind putting Shedeur at 2 or 3 because I really feel strongly that Cam Ward's going to the Titans at 1, and they might not even be open for business. And that puts a lot of pressure on the Browns and Giants to take a quarterback, even if Carter or Hunter is a more highly ranked guy. And as Dale mentioned, I have Membo going high too. I mean, he's the first of those 3 that I think are kind of pigeonholed as the top 3 guys coming off the board there.
Yeah, we're starting to hear at least, you don't know what to believe at this time of year, but kind of the pecking order going into the process, the draft evaluation process, was Ward, Sanders, and then everybody else at quarterback. Mm-hmm. Now we're starting to hear some buzz that maybe Sanders is potentially not in that club either.
It sure seems like Ward stands alone, and he does in my personal rankings too. I think he's in competition from the guys last year. He may have been the 3rd or 4th off the board, where Sanders to me is more like a Penix or a McCarthy prospect, maybe even slightly behind. But we just know how this works. I mean, where else are the Browns, Giants, et cetera, going to get their guy?
Yeah, I mean, it's such a quarterback-starved league, and you know, we have a number of teams out there as we tape this that still don't have a starter in place.
Really?
Surprisingly enough. And so, you know, but there are still, 4 teams that don't have one, and there just aren't enough free agent quarterbacks out there to get one. So somebody's going to be going to fish in these waters. Yeah,
that's kind of the theory I'm employing in my 1 through 10. I've still got Ward 1 and Sanders 3. I've got them in that order, and I've got them both going rapidly because of that. I don't know that Shedeur Sanders is necessarily my second quarterback, but I think he's going to be the second one.
Nor is he like the 2nd or 3rd best player in this draft.
No,
right,
but
the
position value dictates.
I've got the 2 Georgia edge guys there going in succession. Is there any difference between those 2?
A lot of different style, but
stylistically they're a lot different.
But I mean, quality of player and
it depends what you're looking for.
Projecting more at the NFL level than you got at the college level just because of the depth of rotation in Athens.
I look at Walker more as an inside linebacker who can play outside, whereas Matt Williamson, I mean, he's 6'5", 260. He's an edge all day long.
The Saints have traditionally taken those huge edge guys too, the Cam Jordans and those types. That fits pretty well.
Dale, if I'm remembering correctly, you had Genty going to the Raiders as well?
I believe so, yeah.
Not too high for a back if it's that back, right?
Right. I mean, if he's the guy and people were talking about him as being a top 5 talent in this draft, then you don't let him slide. You know, Saquon Barkley was one of the top picks in his draft. Christian McCaffrey was one of the top picks in his draft. Not saying Genty is those guys, but in this particular draft, when you don't have clear-cut top-line talent, which this one doesn't, it's deep, but it doesn't have the blue chippers. If he's the best player, you take the best player.
I think you make the argument he is the best player in the draft. He's not my number one, but he's right there with Carter and Hunter, and Ward's obviously a different beast. But to Dale's point, I don't see a lot of surefire blue chip, no matter when they come out, top 5 picks in this draft, you know?
We're all listing Travis Hunter as cornerback / wide receiver.
Depending where he lands, yeah.
I think he's cornerback first because I think that's the tougher position to find. Whereas wide receivers, you know, you can find those guys. And it's more difficult, in my opinion, to play out of the gate at cornerback, and then you can also then do some wide receiver stuff. You only have so many cornerbacks you can suit up on game day. You can suit up 5 or 6 wide receivers. You may not have that many cornerbacks.
The only caveat to me is if he lands with New England, because their corners, they have 2 really good corners now, and they're really lacking a receiver. I would think if he ends up at 4 to New England, why don't you start running routes, Travis? You know?
Could you see him becoming a, not that he's going to go both ways as he did at Colorado, but situationally play the other position?
Yeah, I absolutely could.
Either in a package type of deal or out of necessity?
Yes. That being said, to me, he's the best corner in this draft and the best receiver in this draft. And if he can do some of both, he could be special.
Matt, let's stick with you as we move it along and check out picks 11 through 20. You got a little Texas thing going on here early.
Yeah, the Dolphins signed James Daniels, who we're all familiar with, but they could use more O-line help, that's for sure. One thing you'll notice in mine, which I didn't do on purpose, is I only had 2 receivers going in the entire first round. And this was the first one, Golden, one to be named later here. Didn't do it on purpose, but it just kind of worked that way. Josh Simmons at 11, I don't know what to do with him. I mean, he's a pure tackle. Free agency has shown us that tackles make a ton of money, and I think they're going to get driven up the board, but he has to get cleared medically first.
And that's the thing, too, with this tackle class. You know, a lot of these guys, you look at them, well, he might be a tackle, but his future might be at guard. Simmons is a tackle. Like, he's got the arm length, he's got the height, the weight, and the experience, the movement. You know, some of these other guys, they're a little on the shorter side, or they got some shorter arms. They're going to try him at tackle first and then decide whether they can stick there or not. Whereas a guy like Simmons, he's going to play tackle.
And from what I heard, you guys were at the Combine. I was watching it on the NFL Network, but the reports about his medical were highly encouraging. Ahead of schedule, and availability is not going to be a problem, and he's doing apparently very well. Yeah,
and that's the only thing that you wonder where he falls in at. On, you know, one team's medical is not the next team's medicals, and so, you know, he's kind of one of the wild cards. There's a lot of them in this year's draft. A lot of the cornerbacks have some kind of injury that they're fighting through, and where do those guys go?
Let's take a look now at Dale's picks 11 through 20.
Yeah, you know, to me, the Golden versus Ted McMillan conversation is one that you know, we know Golden's fast. He ran a 4.29 40. He's got size. McMillan ran a 4.48 at his pro day. He didn't run it at the Combine, and typically those pro day times are faster than what you see at the Combine. So I just think he's an explosive player. I think he's the first receiver drafted this year.
You've also got Derek Harmon, maybe a little higher than I've seen him mocked most places.
He's a good player, and you know, the Seahawks should know all about him. He played last year at Oregon. I just think that you know, when you need big guys that can move like him, who play with a certain style. I don't know where he learned that. Was it Michigan State?
Initially, yeah.
But yeah, I think he's a good player, and we'll see where that falls. The defensive tackle class this year is deep.
Not sure exactly how they'll fall, though.
Yeah, I'm not sure
right.
exactly. It's going to depend on what
Early.
you're looking for.
I think it's like that at a lot of positions. I mean, the word I had heard going into this at the very beginning of the process was it's not necessarily star-studded,
Right.
but there's a lot of depth and a lot of quality. And I think we're seeing this in a lot of these positions. How do you stack them at receiver,
Right.
defensive tackle, offensive tackle, edge rusher? It all kind of depends on what you appreciate.
What style do you play?
Yeah.
And this exercise that we do, we put 32 in the first round 3 different times now. I bet there's been a lot of names cumulatively between the 3 of us, 9 different mock drafts. And that makes sense because there's a lot of them that are kind of similar.
It's more about fit necessarily maybe than can you do it or not.
I believe that's so. It'd be so, yeah.
Let's take a look at what I came up with 11 through 20 now. There you see I've got McMillan going 12. That's my first receiver, assuming Hunter's a corner. You never really know. I really like these edge guys, all of them.
It's a good group.
I don't really. I'm differentiating because I have to.
Right.
Green, Pierce, Stewart, they're all players of great potential. They have great skill sets. Hampton running back at 20. That just feels like a Denver position.
I think I did the same thing, and they do have a need there now. They signed Ingram, so I think they're out of the tight end market. And I wanted to mention the tight end Warren, too. I think 2 of us had Warren lasting to 14. I just don't know where tight ends are going to go. I think he's one of the best players in this draft. I think that's about as low as he could go. I think I have him going there as well. Right, he's a really good football player.
Do you see him as do a lot of stuff as he did at Penn State? Or is he even the Wildcat quarterback and
depending where he lands,
throw an occasional pass and all.
He could be the tush-push guy and do those things too. And he has a quarterback background. And when he does go really high, he probably should send Brock Bowers a fruit basket too.
And then just getting back to Membo in general, or in particular in tackle in general, Matt, the arm length thing. 34 is ideal. 33 you can live with. 32 and you might be thinking about guard.
Yeah, there
Is that
are.
how it works?
Exactly. 34 is what you're looking for. When you draw it up in the draft room, boy, we want our tackles to have 34-inch arms. And last year's class, they pretty much all did across the board, including who the Steelers took. There's a lot of examples of between 33 and 34 where, Penei Sewell, Joe Thomas have had great careers, but it's a little more difficult. Under 33, there's like 0 examples of tackles doing well. It's crazy.
That's amazing.
It's amazing.
I mean,
it's an inch.
This part,
right. But these guys that they'd have to block with the long arms, I mean, they get to you first, and you're kind of sitting there swimming without any, contact.
Yeah,
it's amazing. It's that big a difference.
You have to be an extreme athlete to get by, in that situation. Technician,
right,
all that stuff. And if you look
game of inches, you could say.
It is a game of inches. And, if Troy Fautanu was in this draft, he'd be the #1 tackle.
I agree.
I mean, that's just how deep that tackle class was last year.
Mm-hmm.
All right, let's move on to the bottom third. And, let's get right to it. What do you think? I went there.
You went there.
I like the player a lot. And I think for the team that's making the selection, it's time.
I don't disagree that it's time, and it's been that way for several years now. I just don't know that that's the guy. Now, I say that, and we talked about this draft not being top-heavy at all, but deep. And so what's going to happen in this particular draft, like last year where we get 26 in our final mock draft, 26 players who went in the first round, we got right. It might be 20 this year. Because the difference between player number 12 and player number 60 in this particular year's draft might not be all that different on teams' boards. So I get it, Dart being somewhere in the first round. He may have the same grade as a guy who went 15th. But I don't know. I don't know that I like him that much.
Daniel Jeremiah of the NFL Network, very, very plugged in. His mock came out the morning we recorded this. 21, Jackson Dart to the Steelers.
I actually gave them that information.
Yeah, I figured. He probably got it from you.
DJ,
right.
Well, I think Kuiper's draft that came out today had him 9th.
Did he really?
Yeah.
To the Saints, yeah.
Okay, and they're both 2 of the most plugged-in guys out there. So, I mean, when in doubt, take a quarterback. I understand it.
One of the things, I can't remember if I've mentioned this on one of these shows before, but I heard an interview with Jackson Dart around the Senior Bowl before or during or after, and he talked about his opinion of playing at Ole Miss, and it's a very sophisticated position. It's not as easy as people think. And he talked about the coaching.
It's incredibly difficult.
The coaching, yeah. Maybe get one of the fans to do it. He's talked about the coaching he's gotten from Kiffin, Lane Kiffin, and Joe Judge, and Charlie Weiss, and how you have to be on your details to play there. And that made an impression on me. That maybe he's coming from a good place that way.
I mean, he's been around big-time quarterback developers that have a lot of NFL experience. I mean, there's no question about that. And he's got traits. So, as we mentioned 10 minutes ago, there's a lot of teams that need quarterbacks, including the team picking at 21. Where are you going to get them?
Yeah. You guys were talking about receiver earlier. I've got a couple going late. You see, I love Emeka Egbuka. I've mocked him to the Steelers before. Can't do that this time. I love Walter Nolan. I've mocked him to the Steelers before. Boy, I'd hate to see him go to Baltimore because I like that guy a lot too.
Yeah, and that's the problem with some of this stuff. Like guys who, again, once you get past those first 11, 10, 11, 12 guys, it's like, all right, now what does that particular team need? And that has changed and continues to change throughout free agency.
Let's take a look at Mr. Williamson's 21 through 32 and defensive tackle. Can't argue that's a need.
No, I mean, he's a remarkable specimen that would be more nose than he would 3-4 end, but that you can move him all over the line of scrimmage. He has immense upside. I wanted to mention Maxwell Hairston as well. It's the first time I put him in the first round.
Interesting.
Big need for the Rams at corner. He had a phenomenal testing. He takes the ball away.
Yeah, I think he's one of those guys you guys were referencing a moment ago about the first round could not work out the way we think it's going to because there are a number of those guys that are maybes.
Yeah. And the last guy I wanted to mention, too, is the Chiefs because they traded Joe Thuney. All of a sudden, they got a gaping hole at left guard. Jackson was forced to play left tackle because of the Simmons injury, but he's really a guard. I think they'd be thrilled with him there.
What an advantage, though. You know he can do it.
He can do both, right.
I mean,
because tackle was a problem for him last year.
Those guys have to be position flexible. Yeah, maybe this year it would have been less.
And they asked Thuney to go from left guard to left tackle in the Super Bowl and playoffs, and, he can do that too.
He just kind of tried. Dale, let's see what you've got, 21 through 32.
I also have Kenneth Grant.
There we go.
You haven't killed the Kenneth Grant pick, and he's a Michigan guy.
No, hey, I take them as they come. I was a pretty big fan of Devin Bush, and I still wonder how his career would have worked out had he not gotten injured.
Yeah.
When he did and how he did. But Grant, to me, is kind of the new age interior defensive lineman.
Yeah.
He gets push. He doesn't get a lot of sacks, but he gets pressure.
Reminds me of like a Haloti Ngata or a Vita Vea or those guys. You don't have to take them off. They're not just a stump in the middle, and they're taller and bigger and disrupt passing lanes, and they push people around.
Yeah, and he definitely pushes people around. The other guys I want to talk about there, Gray Zabel, going to the Ravens there.
Another guy, maybe he's a first rounder, maybe he's not.
I hated leaving him out of my first round. I think he is going to end up in the top 32.
And Landon Jackson to the Eagles, to me, just made a lot of sense just in the fact that he is a freak, a physical freak, like 6'7", 270, 265, 270, and tested like crazy. They'll figure out what to do with him there.
They have a pretty good track record developing D-line.
Defense is taking some hits too.
They've lost some guys there, and he would certainly be the next guy to kind of step into that role and maybe flourish in that kind of system.
My only problem, now I know we didn't do trades in this, but if this is going to play out this way, they're going to, in your circumstance, they're going to trade up to 26 and get Jalen Walker because he went to Georgia.
Well, there's that.
Well, yeah, good point.
Georgia guy got to go to Philly, right?
This is the first time, Mike, since the draft in the modern era that we're at this point in the season and none of the first-round picks have been traded.
Yeah,
all 32 of the original
It's
picks.
crazy. Now, I don't expect that to happen.
I was just saying, do you think
on
that's going to hold
day.
up?
I don't. I think there'll be some teams moving around to get those players that they really have a higher grade on maybe than some other teams do. And I think that could maybe push some of the offensive tackles up. Maybe it's the cornerbacks or the receivers that get that kind of motion. Maybe it's the defensive linemen. Who knows?
I wouldn't be shocked, though, if we get to draft day and they're still as all 32 where they're sitting. It might take trades during the draft to make that happen.
Yeah, because typically when you see those trade ups ahead of time, people are moving up for a quarterback.
Or a specific guy.
And you don't know.
And this is maybe a less specific,
Right.
more team need. Well, we got to get this guy or this guy at edge.
We didn't get this in free
receiver or
agency.
this receiver, but it doesn't have to be. Yeah, maybe there'll be less movement. Before we get out of here, Dale, retreat to number 23, because that's a name I don't know if we've talked about yet, but certainly a possibility.
Yeah, he went from Purdue to Texas A&M last year, and A&M asked him to put on about 15 pounds and play on the edge, and it wasn't as good as it had been at Purdue. Then he showed up at the Combine back down to 265. It moved really well, and you start looking at that tape going from the Purdue tape when he played at that weight, and you're going, okay, this is a really good football player. I don't know what it is about the Texas A&M guys. They all are highly recruited guys. They're all, extreme athletes, and then they get to Texas A&M, and you look at where's the production at? I don't know what how they play their defense down there, but I think Scourton's kind of a wild card in this draft as well.
If you look at the Packers too, last year and Jordan Love are the only times they've used first-round picks in like the last 14 years.
They like those jumbo edges.
Oh,
too.
they just draft defense.
Probably not going to be a receiver, right?
Wouldn't think.
That's going to do it for this edition of the Triple Take. I want to remind everybody what you just heard. Those are our opinions, not the opinions of the Steelers. These aren't predictions regarding what's going to happen. This is just kind of how we're feeling it here on Mock 3.0. The next time we talk to you, it's going to be a little different. We're going to do a 3-round mock draft. We will simulate picks up until it's time for the Steelers to select, and then we'll kind of argue or have a very intelligent debate as to where the Steelers should go.
Semi-intelligent debate.
And by the way, I'm spoiler alert, we're going to get them back in the second round. We're going to make a trade.
Makes for better radio.
Give you more bang for the buck. So until then, for Dale and Matt, I'm Mike Prisuta. Thanks for finding us, however you found us. And remember, this quality pre-draft programming is available on all of the Steelers' social media platforms. Until next time, thanks for finding us. This has been Triple Take, brought to you by UPMC.